Okay, we'll call the meeting to order, please. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is a makeup meeting. I want to apologize to any of those who might have come last week. I think everybody got notified in time, but we just did not get public meeting notice out. Just one of the things that fell through the cracks, and so we really couldn't have a meeting. Legally, I think we were able to have a meeting if we didn't do any actual votes on anything, but it seemed kind of stupid to have a whole meeting, not have votes, and then call them in a couple days, and people would have to come back. So, apologize for that. This is actually September's meeting, and so we welcome you to do that. Take a roll. Commissioner Talcott.
Present. Commissioner
Swenson.
Here.
Commissioner Trevila.
Present.
Note that Commissioner Kontravitz and Warren are both absent. Commissioner Humble.
Present.
And I'm present also. The consent agenda is made up of routine day-by-day items that require board action but do not appear to have significant public impact. Items may be pulled from the consent agenda for separate discussion or vote by any board member. The items there are the approval of the board minutes from August 28th, 2002. Payroll checks totaling $98,954.23. Maintenance and operation checks totaling $409,571.94. Approval of passenger facility charge totaling $70,000. And financial reports for August. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll move on. Director's report.
Yes, well, happy September, everybody, and just wanted to go over a little bit on the capital plan. We met last week with the FAA to talk about the next 2 years of capital programming. Typically, the FAA cycle, as we know, just Monday started the new fiscal year for the federal government, and typically in their cycle, they like to talk about 2 years ahead as being pretty firm in terms of the type of the projects that are in there and the type of money that might be available. And so we're beginning to look right now at 2014, federal year 14. In 13, we plan to build a snow equipment shed, and that one's pretty much in the barrel. In terms of what we'll do next year. That project will include bringing utilities all the way down the frontage road. We'll be bringing water, sewer, fiber, and electric down there to the Front Range area. So we'll have some utilities down there that currently we don't have in that area. And then we'll be building approximately 16,000 square foot metal building is kind of what we're thinking now. So we went over that with the FAA, went out and located some utilities with our engineer the next day, and beginning to pull that project together. Also next year we'll be updating the portions of the master plan that did not get updated with the runway optimization study. So that'll be done next year too. Those are the two projects for next year. We're looking ahead now to 14, and the FAA does believe there'll be some funding available for a runway project in 2014. That was kind of a question that we went into the meeting last week. Whether or not we would have funds available. The FAA is planning to have discretionary dollars so that we could do 1634. The optimization study modified the last master plan where we would have been doing 725. According to the last master plan, we're now doing 1634. So the FAA has asked for a little bit more justification on the runway or on the optimization study to make sure that they can make that change in their planning and for our master plan. To change runways, but they do plan to have dollars available in 14. So anytime there's a funding window like that available, we really need to take advantage of it because the project has to compete nationally. So the fact that there is money available, we definitely want to do that project if the funds are realized. We also talked about some strategies of how we could get the project done the way we would like. As you may recall from the optimization study, our crosswinds only really allow us to have about a 4,000 foot runway, at 75-foot width, because the only component of our fleet here at the airport that can't handle our crosswind under the current runway configuration is the very small airplanes. So the FAA allows in their system us to have a crosswind runway for those smaller airplanes, which obviously means less width and less length. We've argued throughout that we have 1634, which is a much more capable runway. It could ultimately be acceptable for any of our airplanes during certain times of year when it's cooler. And so we want to keep 1634, and we want to keep it at its current length and width. So the FAA, we discussed some different strategies of how that could be done. They're talking about possibly just providing funding for what we would call the keel of the runway, which would be the 75 feet in the center. If they do that, then we would ultimately have to fund the outside two portions of it. We might be able to get away with a mill and overlay that wouldn't include the shoulders and then come back and do the shoulders at a later date. There's some different strategies that we could come up with maybe to do the project that way. So we're going to continue to have that discussion over the next month or two as we look ahead to 14 and try to nail down a project. As we get that discussion complete over the next couple of months, we'll be bringing a new capital plan back to the board to look at the changes that have been made. There's not a whole lot of changes over the last couple you've seen, but we will bring it back to the board so we can go through that. But as it looks right now in 2014, we may be back to paving a runway surface and trying to get 1634 upgraded for the longer life of the runway, which would be good. But we want to make sure that's done in a way that we maximize the use of federal dollars on the surface and keep the capability of the runway as best we can. So there'll be more to talk about in the next couple of months. The other thing I was going to mention is Frontier ended their flights on Sunday. We've corresponded with them a little bit. Looks like August was a real strong month for them. We haven't heard anything specific about September. They did say the performance was tailing off fairly quickly, but I think as you got towards the latter half of the month, it really improved. We're anxious to see the whole month's results in September, because I think as we got into archery season, those flights really got full. And in fact, the Thursday before their last flight, I know they were sold out both directions. So we're hoping that the latter half of the month outperformed the first half. It was fairly slow. I think the first week or two of September, we noted there was a little pause in there, I think, as people started school. They just don't like to travel that first week or two. Labor Day is more of a driving holiday than a flying holiday. But as we got to the back half of the month, things really picked up. So we're anxious to see the whole results. I think all in all, it was a really good summer. They at times were our busiest airlines in terms of the load factor. I think if we can show that September was a survivable month, October and December are typically a stronger months than September. So that's actually a good sign if September ends up being an okay month, because the rest of the fall should be as good or better than September. So I think all in all, it was a very good month. We've heard a lot of good things about tourists coming to, or a good summer. We've heard a lot of good things about tourists coming to the area, a lot more tourist traffic. It sounds like, generally speaking, all the hotels were up for the summer. We think that had a lot to do with it. We've heard some interesting things about longer lengths of stay, which would indicate to us you're getting more of the people that have flown in as opposed to driving through and staying a night. From what we've heard thus far, really good results. We're anxious to see the whole picture. And we're beginning to talk about next year. I think one of the good signs that we had in the last week or two is the Frontier person that's got to close down the station called to ask if we could just store their stanchions and their sign and the podium, since they were planning to come back next year. So, that might be reading a little too much into it, but that was an encouraging sign right there. We of course found somewhere for them in the basement that we can keep their things. So all in all, I think that was a great success, and we're real excited to see the full picture in the next couple of months. On to the terminal, to talk about that a little bit.
John, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
And on the Frontier, when will we know about next year? Is that
not until February again?
February, okay.
Yeah. It's really, they make those decisions for spring schedule right before the spring. That's kind of the annual time when they're doing their planning.
Thank you.
Sure. Onto the terminal, to talk a little bit about that. We continue to have a few change orders here and there as we ripped out the bathroom. As we made room for the new bathroom and pulled the walls out and covered some things. We found a few junction boxes that were in the floor that we weren't planning on. that we'll have to move up to a wall space. There's also some controls on the ductwork that we want access to, so we're going to ask them to put in a few service panels so we can actually get up into the ceiling. We've had, as they look into the back of the building and cutting through the steel there, our engineer and their folks are talking about the means of doing that, whether they'll saw through the metal or use another method. And so we're continuing to see some change orders that we're working on with our engineer. Another one that came up here recently is we had some late comments on the fire retardant materials in the back stairwell that will have to be incorporated, that we were working with the city up until the end, along with that $35,000 grill hood that they wanted, which fortunately we got through that issue without a change order. We won't have to put that hood in. But we had some late comments from the city that had to be incorporated after the project was bid. So we're seeing some change orders there. Also, we're beginning to talk about finishes in the terminal, and this is part of the contingency dollars. Right now what we have, this is a drawing of the terrazzo flooring. Right now what we have, I'll let those get around, budget for in the building is just general terrazzo flooring, basic color, kind of like what we used to have before the rivers were put in. Oh, thank you. Oh, there's another one. Well, we can pass that around. That's a little more literal. But what we have budget in the building for right now is it's like the old floor used to be. We used to have that kind of pinkish field of color. They were planning on some basic colors in there where we could maybe have, you know, one block of one color, one block of another. We've asked them for something a little more artistic in flair to match the river scenes that we have on the other side. Here are two interpretations of what they've come up with. Since we have the rivers on this side and pretty much the completion of the river motif on the pre-secure side, what we came up with for the TSA checkpoint right in the middle there is emblematic of the wheat fields. And you can see there in the middle we've got a mowed and unmowed wheat field, or a harvested and unharvested wheat field. We've got one that's irrigated on a circle in there. That's what that's intended to kind of look like. The thought would be, you know, be kind of a wheat-colored terrazzo that would be used. We'd throw down probably some bronze antelope here and there, just to add to the you know, to the motif. And then on the secure side, what you've got there is meant to represent the mountains. As you look out the back building to the west, you see the Rockies. So that range would be to emulate the Rockies. And then the big belts down there on the left side of the page, and the high woods on the right. It's just a different interpretation, but the idea is as you move from the mountains through the rolling wheat fields to the rivers, that's kind of emblematic of our region. So again, you know, this isn't to say we have to do this. There would be probably a markup on the terrazzo to incorporate something like this. You know, we've asked the terrazzo guy to give us an idea of what that cost would be. Right now we don't have an art budget in the program, but given the amount of thought and care that was taken to put the river motif into the front of the terminal, we thought we'd bring this to the board as an idea for the back of the terminal to sort of respect that floor and add to it, because that is likely to be there for the remainder of the life of the building. Just some ideas. It's not to say we have to do it. We could certainly, you know, keep the budget we have, but we did want to bring some different ideas to the board to see, you know, what the reaction would be. We're not asking right now for any kind of approval here. These are just ideas. We'll probably come back to the board in the next couple of months with the matching budget for this and get your thoughts. But I don't know if anyone has any immediate reactions. They like it, don't like it. Different idea. We thought it was kind of cool.
What are the big circles, John?
The big circle's supposed to be the moon or the sun. We're not sure which.
But so there's several of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was just you know, to add to the sky. You know, we said, you know, get the big sky in there too because of the you know, obviously the moniker on the state. Owen, were you?
I was going to say, probably depends on how much it costs.
Yeah, unofficially, when I kind of presented this idea, we met with the terrazzo fellow who came up, and he said, because you're incorporating a lot of different colors of rock, and there's got to be care in it, he thought they could do all of this for probably around $20,000. which isn't too bad when you think of the amount of care that and work that's going to entail. But that was a rough idea. He's supposed to be pricing out the specific schemes. We probably will have that for the next October meeting in a couple weeks. But again, we don't have to do it. We could certainly keep with one common color throughout. We just thought it'd be worthwhile to take a look at it. The other thing I was going to mention, over the last couple of weeks, we've had some correspondence with the TSA on the checkpoint. Typically, their final equipment order is out about 6 months before the checkpoint opens. We had what we call a FSD, a Federal Security Director, last year that we were working with Steve Shovlin. Initially his thought was we could get away with one magnetometer and one body imager. We argued that out with him for a few weeks, and we got to 2 magnetometers and a body imager as a secondary screening. Now we're back to Bert Obert, who was our FSD before Steve Shovlin, and he's back to 1 magnetometer. These discussions have been almost daily, and it's getting pretty insistent on both sides. I think he's very open to the idea of showing the need. What we can actually show, as we've delved into the numbers, is that on a peak hourly basis, so in other words, if you look at our busiest hour of the day on the checkpoint versus Billings and Bozeman, there frankly isn't much of a difference. We board almost as many people in our peak hour as Bozeman and Billings, and that actually makes sense if you think about it, because we all have roughly the same schedule in the morning. Everybody's sending a plane to Salt Lake, everyone's sending one to Seattle, and everyone's sending one to Denver. And also Minneapolis. So roughly it's the same schedule, about the same number of people. Bozeman, in their new checkpoint, was able to get 3 discrete lanes. So my question to TSA is, why can't I have 3 lanes? That seems, that's my starter, is I want 3, and I don't just want 2, I want all 3. And their starter is, well, 1 magnetometer, and then you would use the screener, you would have 2 x-rays that lead up to it. I frankly think that does have a little more capacity than what we have today with the 2 screeners open on either side, because you've got efficiencies of having everything in one location, so the TSA staffing is full there so that they can do all the jobs that need to be done more efficiently. But I really do believe we're going to need that second magnetometer in order to board the Allegiant flights of the day when they fall on top of Alaska and a United or a Delta flight. Looking at the schedule, there's a possibility of up to 300 seats needing to go out in an hour, and the processing capacity of 1 magnetometer is about 150 people. So to me, if we're going 300 and over at times, we really need to have the capacity of 2 plus, not 1, not 2, which would be 300. We need to be above that, such that that screener that's needed for a secondary screening, somebody's hip goes off or something like that, it can be dedicated to those folks and not slow the entire line down by needing to process people on top of being dedicated to people that have artificial hips and that type of thing. So the discussion continues to be ongoing. We've sent some pictures down there, like last, it was Monday. I think we had about 75 or 80 people backed up in the line because an Allegiant flight had to board on top of a United flight through 1 magnetometer. That discussion's ongoing. We're really hopeful that we can get the TSA to do the right thing here. I mean, after a $7 million investment, for us to have barely enough capacity to get by on day 1, regardless of a schedule change or additional flight or a bigger plane that might happen to come in, just seems like a bad idea. So we're working daily with TSA to try and get that resolved. We're hoping to work that out over the next month or 2 so they have plenty of time to order the equipment. The other thing we point out to them too is I don't think anyone's going to have the appetite to change floor plugs and everything else in a year or 2 if we need another machine. We need to get it in now while we can get it in, because we don't want to come back and drill up a brand new floor a year or 2 from now when it shows that we do need this additional machine. So we'll continue to work on that. A little disappointed with the reaction we've gotten right out of the box, but hopefully we'll get it rectified in the next couple of weeks. Also, we've got the auditor coming in on October 15th. They were a little back booked this year, so we're a little later than usual, about a month later than we've been the last couple of years, but they will begin their audit on October 15th. Maria's already been working with them and got them a lot of the schedules so that they have all the data they need to get going and hopefully wrap that thing up in fairly quick order, but they won't be here for another week or two, so we'll be a little bit late. The only real impact that I see is at the end of the year we do an actual update with the airlines where we go back and recalculate the rates based on actual numbers. I'd like to get that done a little earlier so that we have an idea how the year ended up for the airlines. I suspect this year we'll probably be sending them a check, so that's good news. They'll like that because we performed a little better than budget. But it's always good to know that a little bit ahead of time as they look at next year's schedule to be able to tell them, you know, we did better than we thought, rates are coming down, that type of thing. It's good information to have. We are due this month a parking commission check. We have a catch-up at the end of the year in our contract based on the actual performance. If you're familiar with that contract, you may remember it's a graduated scale. We get less of the first dollar than we do of the last dollar. As we reach certain milestones, our percentage of the take gets higher and theirs gets lower because they have to cover their operating costs out of the contract. We should get about $500,000 at some point in October here, which is a good deal as we close out that contract for the year. So you should see that in the next board meeting. And then lastly, we've been working on the retail lease. You may remember 2 meetings ago we talked about we would put together a generic lease for the retail land. We have a developer that's interested in seeing that. We're in, I wouldn't call it heated discussions, but they're certainly interested in knowing more about what we would require of a developer out there. Laura has been working on completing that lease. It's actually down at Mick's office now, and he's going to be reading it this week. So we'll be getting them a kind of a draft lease. We've given you some terms 2 months ago that we said would kind of fall within those lines. And then as we get more specific with them in negotiations, we would bring back obviously an actual lease. But we did want to give him some level of assurance that we had talked some basic terms with the board, like the length of the lease and rental rates and those types of things. So the next couple of weeks, we should be hearing back from hopefully the retail developer on next steps and moving forward with those negotiations. And that is all I have on the report.
Any questions about the director's report?
With frontier leave, anticipate things, the prices go up?
We haven't seen it yet. There still seems to be really good deals that are extending out past the departure of Frontier. I do suspect we'll see some movement in prices because the flights are very full, and all the airlines have mentioned the flights are very full this fall. But as of yet, there still seems to be some pretty good pricing out there. And I think if it coincides with kind of a good time of year to buy a ticket. Typically, one of the better times of year to buy a ticket is right after school starts. The airlines oftentimes have a sale then. But as we get into booking for next year, that's when I think we'll see whether or not the pricing is going to stick. But hopefully that window is fairly short because Frontier comes back maybe in April. Then that booking window would open again right in February. So we're hoping that if there is a price movement, it'd be pretty short-lived.
John, explain that $500,000 related to the parking.
Sure. What we have in there is a graduated contract. They pay us a minimum every month of it's a $33,333. So that's a monthly payment that we receive no matter what. And then there's a second part of the contract that's based on actual results. And so as we get to certain milestones during the year, the percentage of revenue that is ours actually ticks up. And the catch-up is at the end of the year. They go back and they say, okay, you made almost $1 million in revenue. So the first $200,000 was at this commission rate, and the last 200,000 is at a higher commission rate. So it's the way most of the Montana contracts are structured, where you have a graduated scale because they pay all the operating costs of the parking lot, right down to snow removal and personnel and everything. So the take on the first thousands of dollars is much lower than at the other end.
So that $500,000 is, we've done well lump sum to us.
Oh yeah, it's a lump sum. That is our lump sum make whole at the end of the year. And that used to be, I think we were getting about $150,000, $200,000, but because of the increases in passengers and parkers, that number has become a much more substantial number in the last 2 or 3 years.
Other questions? Well, let's move on to capital funding plan.
Oh, I covered that.
That's part of that, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I didn't know where I want to start. And our first item on the agenda is soft cost contingency for terminal project.
Yes, as we mentioned a couple meetings ago, the way we had the terminal budget structured, we had the hard costs in the contract as the majority of the budget up front, and we attached the memo from last month. We typically in the past have never established any kind of contingency budget for our projects. And what was happening in previous large programs was the change orders were approved kind of on the spot, and then at the end of the project, all of the authorization for funding was approved. So technically, the way that the director was operating was without budget. And when something comes up during a project, the last thing you want to do is stop all the bulldozers and everything else, because then you end up with a delay claim. So they were being approved administratively, and then at the end of the project, the budget approval was being caught up. And what we're seeking to do is to change that so that no longer, are we out ahead of the funding authorization, and going forward in projects, we want to establish a contingency budget so we have a way to spend on the project to keep the thing going, and then keep the board informed through weekly reports and through catch-ups at the end of the month. So what we're recommending specifically to the terminal is that we would set aside the $440,000, which is the excess of our funding plan, as a contingency budget. And in this particular case, there's been some projects that have been brought up from the board that are in addition to the scope. For instance, I don't remember who, but someone mentioned it would be nice to get new carpet in the loading bridges. And to maybe refresh the holding rooms a little bit and the hallways. So our thinking is, let's take these additional funds here on the chart, the $440,000, which is even after we buy the loading bridge, is still available for the project, and set those aside and use them for change orders and these soft cost projects that we want to finish along the way. Things like the terrazzo and that type of thing. So if you look at the chart here, what it shows is we have a total construction budget of about $6.6 million. We have funding availability of $7 million down in the third block there, about $7,072,000, and that $440,900 is the residual that's sitting there. Now that comes from our savings, because we do have $2.5 million that we're injecting into the project. To date, the change orders we've approved are down below. These are we had the asbestos issue in the mastic that was unknown underneath that carpet. It had been remediated, for instance, or it didn't exist in our office right next door. But when we pulled up the carpet there and had the material tested, it turned out to have asbestos in it. We had some rental car repairs to the ceiling down there, because the pipe installation ended up being a little harder on the suspended ceiling than we had hoped. And so we had to put in some new ceiling tile down there. As we pulled down the ceiling, we decided we wanted to go to full-length walls all the way up in that bathroom, so the bathroom separated from the office with an insulated wall. There was a deduct change order in there for the beams that were supposed to be grouted. There's some additional bracing that the manufacturer recommended on some of the beams. And then when we opened up the exterior soffit out there, the concrete precast soffit, it was full of blown-in insulation, which was not foreseen in the plan, and they backed that all out in order to get to where the beams need to tie in. And then we have our testing budget, which we talked about 2 meetings ago, to get the FAA certifications on the materials throughout the project. So to date, we've spent about $72,000. Like I said, there are some more change orders coming that we are beginning to be aware of. We just met again today, and we're talking about some like I said, the access to some controls up on the vents that we would like to keep, rather than have to go up into the wall and climb across. We want to put in some what would you call them? Access panels, so we can get up to the duct controls, things like that. So what we're asking for is simply the approval to use the $440,903 for project costs, both soft and change orders. Those change orders we said last month, we wouldn't bring those specifically to the board for approval, but we would continue to keep you aware through things like this chart and through the weekly reports on different activities. And then in the case of like the terrazzo, for example, that would be a decision that we bring back to the board and get guidance on. Should we stay with a playing field? Should we do something a little more extravagant? I mean, what is the board's feeling? And then things like that are out of scope, like for instance, we talked last month about the redoing the Alaska carpet down there. That was something that had been brought up a number of meetings ago by one of the commissioners that was interested in seeing some of those whole rooms refreshed. Those are completely out of the scope of the project. We could certainly pay for them with this fund balance, and those we would bring back to the board in 2 meetings for approval because they're not in the scope of the project. So that's what this budget would be used for. And if, to the extent that we want to incorporate some art elements or something like that into the project at the end, that's something else we could do with this budget. So that's the thinking on the budget. We're asking for the approval to set aside those dollars for the project.
So John, assuming a motion, would it be for the 44903 with these expenditures, or would it be for the 369?
What we have done to date, if you look up at the top here in the first section, we've got the furniture, fixtures, and equipment allowance of $150,000. We've been spending out of that allowance for change orders to date because there is a we plan to buy terminal furniture and those types of things. What we would do is replenish those amounts from the 440 up front. So we would
Do you want a motion for the 44903 contingency and approval of the already expended 71?
What we said at the last month's meeting is as long as we've got dollars in a specific budget, we told the board, they would be approved. And so we've been spending on that. So I don't think we need a motion for the spending down here. We'll just simply buy the furniture out of the 44903 instead of buying it out of the FF&E allowance we have up in the top.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I move to approve the contingency and soft cost budget of 44903.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
So moved and seconded that we approve a contingency budget of $440,903. Discussion.
I just have a couple questions, John. If we do carpeting or furniture refresh, some waiting areas, does that go through the contract or is that separate?
No, we did ask the contractor for a change order what he would want to do the carpet down here, but we think we could actually do better just straight through a carpet, one of the local carpet contractors. So where it's convenient, we may ask for a change order, but if it's out of the scope of the project, we would likely do it ourselves. Like for instance, we're starting to talk to the architect about we've got that seating area for the restaurant that's going to be coming out next to the steps, and we'll have some railing there to make it look like a sidewalk cafe. But one of the things that the architect was saying is it has no sense of space in the building. So we're talking about maybe a lighting fixture, an oversized lighting fixture that would come down and tie that area into the ceiling. That would be something where we would likely find somebody locally to do that directly. It's out of the scope of the project. We don't have to use the contractor. Those types of things. Seating we would do ourselves. We actually have an request for quotes on the street right now for seating for the industry to provide us with seats. So yeah, most of that stuff probably won't go through the contractor actually.
So,
one other question on asbestos. How many times have we run into it?
Right now, just once.
Just in the mastic?
In the mastic.
It was under that, where we're doing the restrooms, the new restroom.
Okay.
And so they removed that mainly because they were worried about the tile not adhering to it as well. But there is probably, we know it's down in a couple of these other holding rooms. The old mastic was left in place and carpet put over it. That's one thing on this carpet, kind of working with the contractor or the carpet supplier and the state as well, talk to the DEQ. Do we have to remove that? Answer is probably not. But
It seems as though because most of this carpet's rubber backed, if we put carpet back over the mastic, the state seems to be okay with us encapsulating it that way. Because we're putting it under mastic, the concern is, that mastic will flake because the mastic underneath it won't adhere. So we worked with the architect to say, could we put a float course over that, to kind of hold it down. In the end, their recommendation was, no, you really ought to just pull it out and start with a fresh concrete floor rather than trying to put tile over top of it. The carpet, though, according to the state, it looks like we're going to be able to carpet over it.
Carpet over the mastic?
Yeah.
As long as it's contained and you don't disturb it, they say you can go over it.
As long as you don't disturb it when you're pulling up the carpet.
Well, one would think.
Other questions?
That's a reason for, a question on the restaurant coming out. They want to tie to the ceiling with just a single?
Well, yeah, what we're thinking is, namely what we talked about last week when the architect was up here would be bringing down almost a lodge type chandelier, but an oversized one that would kind of sit in the center of that area. And what I had mentioned to him was maybe something that's metal that emulates like an elk rack, chandelier, or if you don't like that one, the one I like better actually is I call them the wedding ring chandeliers, but they typically have a metal bar at the top and at the bottom, and they're kind of a fabric looking thing in between. A lot of times that fabric will have animals on it or whatever. But we were just coming up with some ideas of how to give that area some sense of space in that terminal area.
Because I thought we had talked about single light poles in 2 or 3 different places down each side.
We had talked about that, and we have the railings, and what they were thinking was railings with some planters there, and then a lighting fixture hanging down so that from anywhere on that floor your eyes drawn to that area. And I think that's not a bad idea because that ceiling is so high above that. But it's again, that's something we would bring back to the board and say, is this a direction you want to go? We'll probably have that one for either November's meeting or maybe December's meeting, where we'd have kind of a rendering of what that would look like.
Well, certainly with planters there, it would alleviate people sitting on it or placing things on top of it.
Of the restaurant area? Yeah, and we'll have some railing in there too to kind of enclose that area so people don't, go in there and kind of sit at it without being in the restaurant. But
thank you.
Sure.
Other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, now we're going to go to the broom.
As we mentioned last month, we had been hoping to salvage one of our older broom units and get it back up to an operational condition. And over the last couple of years, it's been the elusive sort of piece of equipment that we thought we were close to getting it fixed, and it just continues to have issues. And so, as we looked at our fleet and realizing we had gotten those units from the Air Force, we realized they have quite a bit of life left on them. And the setup that they came with of 2 blowers is not really that effective for us. We only typically ever put 1 blower on the field at any given time, and that's typically at the end of a storm. So it doesn't run throughout a storm. It's typically at the end to blow the heavy windrows out of the lighting. And so our thinking is, if we go out for $64,000, we can buy a broom to put on the front end of one of those Oshkoshes so that we have a broom unit, which we do use in every storm, pretty much throughout an entire storm. And that gives us a much more effective utilization of the equipment, because instead of having a dedicated second blower in reserve if something breaks, now we have a piece of equipment we can use in our normal function of a storm and have a secondary function of being a snow blower on top of that. So what we're asking for is permission to buy a $64,000 broom. It is part of our snow plan to continue to use front-loaded brooms. You may remember last month we're also buying a tow behind broom. We'll be at 2 tow behinds. Once we get the new tow behind unit, we hope to eventually get to 3 tow behinds and then have 1 dedicated broom. Today what we'll end up with, until we can get that one a couple years down the road, is we'll end up with 2 tow behind brooms, 2 mainline brooms?
Yeah.
Front row brooms, and then we'll have this 3rd one in reserve for the heavier storms and also as a blower.
So you'd like a motion for that?
Yeah, for the $64,000 front broom attachment.
So do we have a motion to expend $64,000 for a front broom?
I move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Do we have room to store it when we're not using it?
Yeah, well,
Kind of.
we're tight on storage, but yeah, we do. And then with the building that John talked about before, you know, it's going to give us a way better situation for storage of equipment, where like now the tow behinds, we break into 3 pieces to put it away. Have to hook all that up at the store, and a new building will be where everything just stays attached, drive it in, drive it out. So.
And then what we've done too is we have 2 pieces of equipment that we're surplusing. The old broken down broom we think we could sell for parts, and that may only yield $2,000 or $3,000. But then the snow blast, the old blower that we had, was our backup blower before we got the Army units. Or the Air Force units. We're now going to sell that because we have pretty reliable blowers now. We can take that older blower and try to sell it. We've got both of them listed now on Equipment Trader.
Yeah, machinery trader.
Machinery Trader. I get that wrong. And we're also, I think, going to put them out on eBay. Is that still the plan? Try and unload those. You may remember we were able to sell a truck earlier this year, a fire truck, for about $18,500. So. We're yielding a little bit of cash back to the bin to help pay for this front unit. And then if we can sell the snow blast, we think that's about $10,000 of equipment too that you know, a rural county or a rural airport could really use in the wintertime.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is approved. Now we get down to the carpet, the Alaska hold room, which includes carpet and installation.
Right. As we mentioned just a few minutes ago, this is from contract flooring. It's not inside the scope of the project. We did get a price from the contractor, and I think it was about $600 higher than this.
Yeah, it was slightly higher.
And so we decided we'd probably look at doing it directly through a flooring contractor. What this will do is, if you go down to the Alaska hold room and the Legion hold room today, there's a giant old podium right there in the very middle of the hold room. And that's where the airlines used to do their check-in. Well, about a year ago we realized neither of the airlines uses that any longer, and it's literally just sitting there in the way. We can't get seats in there. And with the Legion flying more and more, what we'd like to do is get that podium out of there. Well, of course, when we pull that out, there's not carpet underneath the podium itself. So we'll have a hole there, and as Rod and I talked about that, we thought, you know, it'd be a good idea to go ahead and get one of the hold rooms with the new carpet and kind of refresh it a little bit, so it's you know, we have at least one thing we can look at and say, this is what's coming, this is what it'll all look like in a year or so, and then we can get that podium out of there and increase the amount of seating capacity. So it's outside the scope. What we would plan to do is, with the $400,000 that was just approved, we would go ahead and fund this out of there to get this done, but it is outside the scope of the project, so it did take 2 readings to do it. But about $6,000, and we'll get the carpet replaced down there in Alaska. Our guys can pull the podium out and do all the utility terminations there, and then we'll go ahead and recarpet it and get the flooring fixed.
Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second
Discussion? Questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And our goal would be to get this done before the holidays, so you know, we've got it kind of cleaned up a little bit.
Is that Thanksgiving or Christmas?
We're hoping for Thanksgiving. I'm hoping for Halloween, actually.
And the loading bridge purchase, I believe we were going to be given extra information on this.
I don't know if
Came in
Rod,
your revised packet,
Yeah, we-
I sent out on Friday.
yeah, we've got some in here we were able to include now. We've got refurbished and new. Looks like we can get a bridge kind of.
Just a second. I've got the new board packet on, loaded, and it still says board meeting agenda item number 4 will be emailed or brought to the meeting.
No, I don't have it.
And so I didn't receive it.
Here's one.
Who else doesn't have it?
I don't.
those extras?
Stephanie's gonna go.
Okay, throw a few more.
I think I have,
They have
Do you have it?
those three.
it's just the used, refurbished, and new data.
That's it, yeah.
I think we've got it.
I didn't get
Wonder
it.
why I didn't get it.
I don't know.
Did you get it via email?
Yeah, I got it on the second.
Would it come on Friday, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I would.
Huh.
Was it an attachment to that email instead of separate from the board packet? Because I didn't.
Should have been in a
Should
PDF.
have
I
been,
could have
yeah,
downloaded
with
the
that
wrong one
email.
again, I don't think so
I
though.
don't think I did either, but we did something.
So if we're the only ones without it, we can quickly go through this and.
We did go ahead and price loading bridges, both new and refurbished. There's some Las Vegas bridges from one of their concourses that they've taken down that are functional, but they're 20 years old. We can get those at a fairly deep discount, 170,000, just under 170,000. But we think it makes more sense to try and get those refurbished. We have a 20-year-old bridge now, and that's not too reliable. And the best thing, in our opinion, is to go ahead and have those bridges redone with new motors and that type of thing. They did say they thought there was a couple of them that had been refurbished, so that might be one thing we would look at to see, if the used bridge that they're willing to sell, does have new componentry. But what we would like to do is update them to the more modern controls. Right now, all of our jet bridges have the same control set. In fact, no, is there one that's still the older set, isn't it?
Well, there's two newer electronic controls and then the old relay controls in the old one.
In the old two. So we got two newer ones and two older
Two
ones.
newer ones, two older ones.
Yeah, and so the idea would be to get this one up to a newer standard so that we have some consistency across the bridges. What we're looking at is either we could buy new. It's within the budget we set aside for the bridge. Our recommendation would be to buy a refurbished one. We just think with new carpet, new motors, and everything else, it's practically a new bridge when you get them refurbished.
Because they haven't.
So, when you bought them last year, John, if you don't mind me asking, you got prices at 362 and 351, and you wound up paying 310. Just change the options, change the stuff you had on it?
Well, what happened was, I guess it was Denver, is what I've heard since then. But Denver put in an order and put down a deposit on a bunch of loading bridges, and they ended up with one extra. And so they kept the deposit, and they were willing to sell it at a deep discount. And it actually was a longer bridge with more capability than what we had specified. But they were willing to sell it for $310, and we had planned on paying about $280, for a refurbished bridge. And so when we brought it to the board, I think the board wisely chose to buy the new bridge at the discount, and so that's what we did. So it was a one-time deal, and we're kind of fishing out there. I think we may, wait a little while, even if we get authorization, we may wait a little while because we don't need to have that bridge on site for months and months and months. The idea would be to kind of put it out there that we want a bridge, give them the specifications as we've done, and just kind of see if a good deal happens to pop up again, to get something at a deep discount. But if we have to pay these prices, my recommendation would be to buy the refurbished, because you're more or less getting a brand new bridge. The only thing that's dated on it is the metal on the exterior, the metal tube itself.
Do as much or as little as you want. You could buy them as is, or you could get new carpet, new wheels, new motors, all kinds of different controls.
So a motion, would you, to buy a refurbished one, but you want an amount in there, but there's, or not?
Well, right, I think what, my
yeah,
recommendation would be to buy the refurbished bridge and get a motion for the 285 for a refurbished bridge. Certainly last year, like I said, the board, we made the same motion last year, and the board wanted to buy new, and that made a lot of sense. But as it sits right now, we don't have an option to get a deal like that.
It's already approved at $350 right now in the budget.
It's in the actual project budget at $350, that's true.
And
So-
these are just kind of budget numbers. We haven't got an official bid price on these numbers.
So as long as we budget at $350, it wouldn't really matter if you ended up with refurbished, or if you can come back with another good deal for,
Right.
I don't
So
see the
basically,
need
this is
for
an
it.
information item then.
Well, we had planned on bringing it to the board for action, but, you know, I mean, if you, you know, what I would ask for is a motion for 285 and we'd buy refurbished, but I guess that's true. If a good deal does happen down the pipe, I mean, it might make
Then you're not
sense
tied
to.
up.
Do a not to exceed or something.
Yeah, not
If a
to
new-
exceed 350.
The only time I think you would need action is if we were going to exceed 350 by a few $1,000s because you could get new. At this point, you've got the luxury of spending up to 350,000.
Well, I should take that back though, Susan. When we made the recommendation from the terminal, remember we cut the bridge out because at the time we didn't know we were going to get the full grant amount.
But we have gotten the full grant.
We did, but we've
So-
never amended the budget.
Okay.
So we don't have budget.
We are not budgeted for the
We're
350.
we're not budgeted for 350. It's shown in the project budget under options, but we never took action on the 350.
So the recommendation then is to make a motion to spend up to $285,000 for a refurbished bridge, is that right?
That's what we had intended to do.
But we did get the funding up to 350.
We did, yeah, we did.
Then I would make a motion that we allow up to 350,000 and make what kind of a deal you can. If it's going to exceed 350, then come back for approval, or just tell us which one you got for that. So I would move that we approve the 350,000.
Okay.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second that.
I've got a question. Will this include any infrastructure expenses? I mean, like,
Installation would be the only.
Installation.
Well,
But the
that
foundation?
price would include installation. The project includes the foundation and electrical.
okay, that's all included in this?
Yep, the pedestal foundation is in the ground today.
We had intended to possibly not buy a bridge last year. That's why we,
Oh, but you've already got it?
Yeah.
You've got the,
yeah,
and it'll fit whatever one you buy?
yeah.
Yeah, they're standard base. The only thing when you order them, you
Height
cut the
jacks.
pedestal to the height of their doors.
Yeah, you may have to cut the pedestal some.
Yeah. And last year when we bought that new one, that price didn't include the foundation, which came up to about 25,000,
I
30,000.
was going to say it was almost 40,
Yeah,
but I thought it was 38, but.
might be a little over 30.
But yeah, the project's taking care of the pedestal and the electrical hookups, and then, you know, we just need to buy the equipment. But last year, we had toyed with the idea when we weren't sure about the grant amount of not buying a bridge and then having Alaska ground load off of that gate. Since then, the Salt Lake City gate has really become fairly unreliable. And so what we're hoping to do now is to move Alaska to that gate, because they rarely use a loading bridge, and put Delta on the new bridge, and then have Allegiant on their current bridge by themselves. So that's kind of the plan we're pursuing right now.
So on this motion, the idea isn't that now try and find something 350,000 and still to get the best deal that you can on what you think is going to last. Either is that
Right, we want to get a good deal on this. I mean, the loading bridges, they're an important piece of equipment, but you know, what typically breaks on them is the wiring and the motors. And so, you know, I think you get a lot of value out of the refurbished bridges. But, you know, should we find another brand new bridge at a deep discount, you know, it would make sense to take advantage of that. The bridge we bought last year is a really nice bridge for the money we paid.
Motion just gives you the luxury if you happen to luck into a good deal.
exactly? Other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries. I think that does all the formal business. Are there comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Halcon?
I have no comment.
Swenson?
John, man, the reserve building, what's going on that, anything?
Nothing new. We're still working with the consultant. We're hoping to get a letter out to the Army Guard to denote some of the environmental issues we found in the building. We found some uncontained asbestos. They have some exposed mastic. They have some pipes that are ripped open. There's some spilled oil and sand in one of the outbuildings that was never cleaned up. There are a number of environmental conditions there that need to be remediated. The broader question, and one of the more concerning issues with the building is the shooting range had two issues. The first is with all that lead being shot into the air, there's lead that ended up in the ductwork, and they did try to clean the ducts, but the standard they used to clean to is a HUD standard, which isn't recognized by EPA. So it's unclear as to whether or not that building can be occupied under EPA standard, because increasingly the EPA is very, very concerned about exposure to lead. The health issues now are coming to light that they're very serious, and any lead exposure is being viewed as a bad thing. So that's one issue where right now there isn't any clear guidance, but it doesn't appear as though the remediation that was done is satisfactory. So we're continuing to question that with the EPA. And then the other issue with that same shooting range is it has a floor drain where it is apparently to wash the floor down after they've been shooting, and there's some type of underground enclosure that catches that runoff, and what's not clear is where that's piped to, or whether that containment has been satisfactory to keep the lead from migrating into the soil. The other issue that that I think could be potentially concerning is the oil water separator in the back has an underground tank. Typically over time those leak. In addition to that, there's some kind of mysterious drain plug on a chain, and there's sporadic records as to when that was emptied. So our concern is, after looking at it, was it ever simply pulled and allowed to drain into the ground, which means there could be the potential for petroleum and solvent remediation needing done. So what we're pursuing right now is to have a letter written that will kind of denote some of these things. We'll request some additional phase 2 work. We'll request some cleanup on the asbestos and more cleanup on the lead, and then continue to let them know that we believe the right thing to do is tear the building down. In the interim, there's been some discussions that maybe that parcel could be given to Mang as part of their lease, so we continue to pursue that angle too, because it's right up against their gate, and it shares a fence line for the majority of the property site with Mang. So obviously they're very concerned about what activities would take place on that site anyway.
So the process is ongoing.
It is ongoing.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Commissioner Hummel?
No comments.
And I have no comments. Is there any public comment at this time? Seeing none, we will adjourn the meeting and come back, and can we do it in 5 minutes?
Absolutely. We only have one item.
Let's just keep.
Is that too short a time, Peter?
Sir, I have a couple of questions to ask your director, if you could keep it a little longer.
Yeah, well, let's make it 10 minutes and we'll come back at 10 after 2. That's what I was asking. We're adjourned.